Thanks for listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast, joined by the boss, Saul Bookman. I have been looking forward to this all day. Hello, Saul Bookman. I will go even louder.
How's it going, Mike?
All right. Every now and then I get to come hang out with the cool kids in the studio, joined by the boss. We got Jacob Franklin behind the scenes showing me some YouTube stuff. Jacob, you got to give me a little bit of credit. I knew more than you probably thought I did.
Sure.
We'll
go with that.
That is not a character reference right there, but we have a lot to get to today. By the way, with this very cool shirt, Saul.
Thank you.
Where did you get this shirt?
This is a Bad Birdie shirt.
Oh, Bad Birdie shirt. Okay. All right. We've got, like I said, a lot to get to today, but we are going to talk some Arizona basketball recruiting first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at Tommy Lloyd, obviously, by the way, have you noticed that the people that were questioning Tommy Lloyd's recruiting, not really questioning it too more? It's almost like he kind of, maybe took a little bit of time and figured it out. That's for people questioning Brent Brennan as well. It's Saul Bookman.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Now, listen, he's gone obviously far more in a domestic approach of late. You look at his first couple classes; these were heavily international dominant player. I mean, again, you were getting domestic players, but you look at this class that he's got coming in right now, and you look at Carter Bryant, you look at the players that he's recruiting in the next class. We're going to get to that. It does seem that there's been a little bit of a shift. What are your initial thoughts on just kind of what we're seeing and maybe the metamorphosis of Tommy Lloyd as a recruiter?
Well, I think if you're at Gonzaga, you have to find all the little nooks and crannies, right? And maybe your money is better well spent in terms of going overseas to get bigger, big time athletes, because the competition overseas isn't as vast as it is here in the States, and your money can go a little bit further because if you hit on some of those European prospects, you'll have a really good program. Whereas here in the States, listen, man, like you've only got so much money.
Right.
And to go overseas constantly to recruit when you are a top tier program, I'm not saying Gonzaga is not a top tier program, but like Arizona's Arizona, and to be able to attract the type of clientele and athlete that you need to get here, I don't think you need to spend as much money going overseas. And I think Tommy Lloyd I honestly think this is more of a financial decision than anything else. Let's save some of that money, give it to the players, and get high quality American players in here, because it's cheaper to travel to see them every day than it is to go to Yugoslavia or Spain or wherever. And
this might just be me because I'm not generally the smartest guy in the world, but it's easier for me to be able to watch kids play against each other here in the States. We'll be at Section 7 later on and watch the best players. You can watch all of them converge. I mean, you played, it's a lot easier to be able to see that, I think, than looking at having to fly to, Yugoslavia, where there might be 2 Division I players that you're going to see all day, as opposed to going to an AAU tournament here in Phoenix or Los Angeles, where you've got everybody that is a Division I player. It's just easier to see. It's easier to be able to gauge where they're at athletically, where they're at mentally, than it is overseas. And again, Tommy Lloyd's obviously done a really good job of it, but to me, I've always thought, for somebody like me, it's a lot easier to be able to ascertain what I'm watching up close when they're going against D1 players.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. I would say this though, the European advantages is like some of these kids have been playing against grown ass men for quite a while. So they do come in a little bit more fundamentally sound and a little bit more ready to go off the bat. I think some American players, but the top tier American players is who you're talking about. And those guys don't need as much of a runway. So I think Tommy Lloyd's trying to figure that out. And also, I just want to address something in the chat. I think that's B Burns or something like that. 620 said, did they make Mike change hats to allow him in the studio?
No.
No.
I have bad news on the hat. I am not thrilled about it. The hat has been misplaced again. I will hopefully find this, because if not, I will not be wearing a hat on tomorrow's show. So we need to find the hat. I will address this later. But this is the again, desperate times call for desperate measures. But either way, I will not be wearing a hat if I cannot find that. Jake Fisher, by the way, I was actually DMing with Dilly and gave you as a reference to the Del Taco cheeseburger. He was telling me that he didn't really like he didn't know about the Del Taco cheeseburger. I said one of the captains of Arizona football vouched for it, and I sent him the screenshot. So we will revisit that in a little bit. But yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see. One thing I like about Lloyd, though, is I think Lloyd has really mastered, Saul, the transfer portal and the domestic recruiting. There was an article out, I think it was by The Athletic, that said that when it comes to impact players, Tommy Lloyd is basically behind just Danny Hurley. He is pretty much next to nobody when it comes to bringing in instant impact players. And think about it. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. Has anybody that he's brought in on the transfer portal front not been a contributor or what a player where you're like, oh man, you can't put him out there?
No,
I mean, that's what's amazing about him.
I mean, none of these players have been, though, under Tommy Lloyd. Like anybody that they put out there, they relatively have held their own. And he's done good on the transfer portal. Again, it's not about, for Tommy, Tommy's just always going to be in this never-ending battle to get back to the Final Four, and that's what everything will be judged again. He could have the best team in the country if they somehow flail and don't get to the Final Four, then all the recruiting was wrong. Even though he might have had the top 5 prospects in the country, right? So that's what it really narrows down to. And I think Tommy's, listen, man, I know everybody would love to think that because he's been college basketball for 20 plus years and now he's going into his 4th season at the U of A, that he's got it down. I think he's got it down to a certain degree, but I think he's still learning in terms of, and I think a lot of coaches are. A lot of coaches are learning kind of on the go with NIL, where to make the best use of your money. Not even to mention, like, think about the financial constraints that Arizona is under right now because of their because of the money that they owe the school. I'm sure that has a little bit of limitation. So Tommy's trying to work around all that and trying to get the most out of his money and getting the most out of this program. I think he's doing a fine job.
Yes, doing a very good job. Now we're going to start talking some recruiting. All right, let's talk a little recruiting. This is also where Arizona is awesome, and this is where it's really fun to watch Arizona, because if an Arizona player leaves, then guess what? You're probably going to be in the running for another 5-star. Why don't we talk a little bit of Will Riley first? The great Jacob Franklin has some highlights of Will Riley. We will watch here.
Nice player, smooth release from the outside. He's got a little bit of a weird kind of release at the end sometimes where the kick happens, but listen, he's 6'8", 6'9". He could still be growing as we speak right now. He's supposed to be for next year's class, but I've seen him play multiple times. I think the jumper is nice and smooth. I don't think there's much that he's going to have to tweak. The rotation on his ball needs a little bit of work. But man, he's got a nice all-around game. He's a 6'9" guard. He could handle the ball. He could take it to the basket, shoot from the outside. He does everything you want him to do. This is a top-tier prospect for sure.
And he is fully eligible to play on next year's team if they want. And that is how Arizona is recruiting him as such. So it's going to be interesting. Here's the big key for Arizona. You got to get him out of this week. He's visiting Kentucky, which is probably Arizona's biggest concern right now. You're visiting Kentucky. You've also got Illinois in there, but Kentucky is the one that is making the full court push. This is somebody that Tommy Lloyd would absolutely love to add to next year's class. And honestly, Saul, that would be the most Arizona thing ever, to be honest with you, where you lose a 5-star player, and guess what? You bring in a 5-star player. That's what we do around here.
You know, I'll say this. Will Riley looks like you could tell he's raw. You know, you could tell he's got some things that he could improve on. Physically, he's going to get stronger. He's going to get bigger. He's going to get more explosive. But overall, he seems like the prototypical Tommy Lloyd development guy, where he will come in. He's already a top-tier player. He comes in, he develops, and then all of a sudden he's in the top 10 of the NBA draft the next year. I could see that kind of ability for Will.
Exactly. And that's what I like too. I like recruiting players where I might have a kernel of thought that maybe they get a second year. We get a second year out of them.
Maybe.
Now, again, I think with a lot of players, they're looking to get to the league. I get all of that. Totally understand that. But I do like, as we talked about it before, like with Carter Bryant's father. And I said, you got a McDonald's All-American kid on your hands. What are you thinking? And he goes, honestly, we're going to trust the process. We got to be here 2 years. Then you know what? He's getting an education. He's going to be here for 2 years. I love that thinking. I love that mentality. And because again, too, these players are getting paid. And so, don't rush it. Will Riley, though, a very fascinating player when this all comes down to it. We will find out. But like I said, this will be I would expect this recruitment to probably be over in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And I think Arizona's in it. We talked about it a billion times. Tommy Lloyd doesn't waste time on kids. He might not get a kid, but I get people all the time that are like, oh, he's only got 6 offers out. He's got a very, very specific way in which he goes about. Sean Miller was a lot easier because Sean Miller, and I'm not even blaming Sean Miller. Sean Miller offered a lot of kids. And you know what? If they were interested, he came back. Tommy Lloyd zeroes in. He does his homework first. And then he decides, all right, are we going to offer him? Is it worth? And should I task Jack Murphy with this? All of that. So Will Riley is on that agenda as well.
Yeah, he's solid player. Like I said, and I do love that perspective. It's like, don't waste your time going after players that you don't know. Listen, I think maybe some coaches might go with the approach like if any player I get that's a top tier player, I can make work into my system.
Right.
Whereas Tommy Lloyd's very much not like trying to do that. He's trying to find players that will fit his system, that he knows will fit his system. And I think Will Riley could definitely do that.
All right. Now let's talk about another one as well. Jacob Franklin was asking me about this guy earlier today. We have Xavier Staten. He's from Las Vegas. I love players like this. I think in this day and age, I love having a shot blocker. I think it is such a big difference. This is somebody that Arizona is prioritizing. When you look at the class of 2025, we're going to talk about some other names, but this kid's an absolute monster. You can just tell by looking at him. Might need a year or two, but he has taken off. Arizona has been all over him. He is he is being recruited at the very highest of levels. Arizona wants him. I like that flex, by the way. It was very cool. Let's say you, Saul Bookman.
He feels like Charlie Villanueva with Richard Jefferson shit talking ability.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I love these highlights. Like he's got length. He can get to the rim. You can tell he's got a competitive spirit about him that you got to love. He does look like a development project for sure. He's like somebody that's, a little too lean. He's going to have to get stronger. He's going to have to get bigger. And I don't know what league this is, but it definitely does not feel like a premier league of sorts. So again, like these are all, every kid that comes in to various levels is a developmental project.
No doubt.
You don't know if they're going to develop really quick and become a starter or if it's going to take them a couple years. But I do like, again, I want kids that love basketball.
Right.
Like that's first and foremost. That's like the first question I would ask is like, how much do you love ball and tell me why? And it looks like that kid does.
Lloyd said an interesting thing when he was talking about Christian Coloco is when he took over. He said he was asked about Coloco and he says, listen, one of the most inherently difficult things in basketball is to teach somebody how to block shots. You either have it or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And, like Umar Ballo. Umar Ballo's a big dude. Umar Ballo was never going to average 3 block shots per game. Christian Coloco was new to basketball, but it was natural to him to block shots. He said, you always want to try to find somebody like that because that's a gift that you can't necessarily replicate. And he went on to say that he'd like to get one of those guys per class. This would be a very nice one. By the way, Emmanuel Steven, another one of those ones from here in Phoenix, who just set foot on campus, by the way, as well. I would look for 1 shot blocker per class, and I think that is a very good thing. I like that theory a lot, Saul Bookman.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Now, let's see here. This is my first time in the welcome to the PHNX Wildcat show, but this is presented by Circle K, my friends. Head to any Circle K Arizona location where you can get any size Polar Pop or Froster for just 79 cents now through September 3rd. By the way, Saul, look what I stole out of the kitchen.
Got yourself a meat stick.
All right. Again, there's never been a more opportune time to go to Circle K to get one of these. These things are absolutely fantastic. Again, check it out. Jacob Franklin got one of these as well. He was the one.
I ate one earlier. I was hungry. I need some lunch.
Jacob Franklin was the one that inspired me to go about doing this. So again, I got this. So you can also join Inner Circle for free by downloading the Circle K app. Terms and conditions apply at participating locations. Visit CircleK.com for details. Okay, now Tunde Yesufu. He has set up his visit with Arizona. We know you are a big fan of Tunde, Saul Bookman. Big guy, exactly. He is going to be here in the middle of the month. Jacob Franklin, do we have any of those highlights, perhaps?
Yeah, Tunde's highlights are legit.
Yes.
Love Tunde. Again, like I just think overall he's a good solid player. Jacob, you don't have him?
No, I was not asked for them.
Yeah,
so
that's
let's just put that one out there.
That's on me. Yeah, I do apologize. But either way, Tunde is a guy that, we talked about, physically very, very strong. And like we talked about before, instant impact guy. We talked about just right there with Xavier Stanton. Probably going to take a little bit of time for him to be able to really get to where he wants. Saul, when you watch this kid, though, players that are built like this, they don't come around a lot. A lot of times these people, they're kind of built like a Carter Bryant, which is the way that most high school kids are supposed to be built. Get a player like this in there. You don't have to worry about him having to get with Chris Rounds before he's on the table. No. You already know that he is ready to go, depending on what he can do.
No, that kid's built. He's built. He's ready to go. Definitely. Obviously, like, he gives you kind of like Lou Dort kind of vibes in terms of his tenacity, his aggressiveness. He can score. He's good with the ball, but like, he's just a good all around player. And defensively, he really gets after it. He's diving on the ball for loose, or diving on the court for loose balls. Like, he's just, again, you need dogs on your team. And I think that's the other transition that maybe, I don't think Tommy will outright say it, but I do think that he likes the mentality, especially as it comes to the college game, a little bit more from the American players than maybe the European players. Maybe the European players come in and maybe the mentality in terms of physicality and aggressiveness isn't as to the point where he likes it.
Right.
And he kind of learned that maybe the first couple of years. And so now that's the type of player they're going to run after.
What's nice about this too is that there's going to be an overhaul in this roster the following season. Caleb Love obviously is coming back, but he will be out of eligibility after this. Then you've also got KJ Lewis, who the coaching staff expects will go off to the NBA after that year. Yeah. You're going to have multiple opportunities here to be able to get instant impact players. And again, they'll hit the portal for it. But when you see somebody like Tunde, yes, please sign me up for 2 Tundes, especially if they want to be able to do that. That was good.
Yeah, Tundes.
That was very, very good. And I wanted to get into something else about this too. Lloyd has really, I think, carved out a very nice little spot in Southern California. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say that, that he's running the state, but he's done a pretty good job. Look at it. Kylan Boswell, obviously didn't work out, but he was a 5-star kid out of California. Carter Bryant, 5-star kid out of California. Yeah. You look at You look at Tunde Yesufu, 5-star kid or 4 or 5-star kid out of California. Braden Burry's another one we're talking about. He has really started to stake his claim in that California region, and honestly, he's done a really, really nice job of it. And that's something too that every coach has kind of that little breadbasket approach. For a while, Sean Miller's was Northern California. Yeah. With those Oakland Soldiers, you're dealing now with a guy that he's getting Southern California. And I think more importantly, there's a little bit of a power vacuum there. We talked about this before. Mick Cronin, who really wants to play for Mick Cronin? And then on top of that, USC Eric Musselman. I like Muss, but if it's Muss or Tommy Lloyd, I'm probably looking at Tommy Lloyd. Very good stuff, Saul.
Yeah, very good stuff. I don't know. I think Tommy Lloyd is going to end up getting to more Final Fours. Oh man, we're gonna set up.
Say it.
Set up. I think he's going to end up getting to more Final Fours eventually by the end of his career than Luke.
So you got more than 5.
I think he's going to get to at least 5.
All right. Wow.
I think once the first one hits, then it'll start to trickle in and it'll become a little bit more routine than it has been.
Yeah. Bill Self, that's a great point. Bill Self made the point for a while because, Bill Self for the longest time, he didn't get to a Final Four either. And Jim Calhoun was the same way. Jim Calhoun, I don't think, made his first Final Four until like 1999. He obviously cut down the nets. They said there's just something weird about it that when you get through that barrier, he said it just becomes easier as a coach. And he said, I'm not doing anything differently. I'm not doing anything, but in a weird way, that's just kind of off your back. I like that though.
I think you become more efficient as a coach. You become more efficient with your time and you really hone in on what you're trying to get out of every single practice, every single day, every single little detail. And when you're a young coach starting out, you're trying to narrow all that in. You're trying to figure out your own style. You're trying to identify what it is in players that you think will make them great.
Right.
And it takes a while sometimes for some coaches. And I think Tommy's starting to hone in on that.
Right, for sure. And I think Tommy's also very comfortable with what he's doing here. Yeah. I like watching Tommy when he goes around, and I can't wait to see him up in Section 7. Tommy Lloyd is a very interesting guy at these recruiting tournaments. Like Sean Miller was always right there. He was the first person there on the stands. And he was watching you. He was not BSing with any coaches or whatever. Lloyd is interesting. Lloyd is the exact opposite. Lloyd goes there and pretends like he's not watching, but he is watching. He is watching because one time off camera on a game where he was watching Cody Williams and he was pretending that he wasn't watching. Now, granted, Bruce Pascoe was harassing him the entire time, so
of course
I can't really blame him for that. But he made a quick little quip about that play that I think was an alley-oop or something, and I'm thinking to myself, dude, I was looking right at you when that play happened, and you were not watching it, but he knew exactly what happened right there. Stealth right there. I like that.
Tommy's got some good awareness about him. I don't know why anybody would hate Tommy Lloyd. Like it feels very much like that one guy on Twitter that's just constantly going at Tommy Lloyd. I think he even comes at you. Hey, he's just a weirdo. But do you have your style? Do you know what you're looking for? Do you know what you want? And I think Tommy's ability to communicate, I think we've seen it. Yeah. We've seen him come over and bullshit a little bit. And it makes him who he is. It makes him feel like you're in a stable program and this guy's got your back and he's going to tell you if they're not working.
And what I like about him, too, is he's also a man of the people. That is a good thing. He likes being able to just go to Bob Dobbs. He likes to be able to go there and hang out in the corner and he wouldn't be able to do that at a big place. If he went to Lexington, Kentucky or Chapel Hill, I don't think he'd be able to do that.
Would you consider Lexington, Kentucky a big place?
Well, I'll call it. All right, let me read.
It's not really big. No,
it's not.
It's not big.
Isn't it the second biggest city in Kentucky?
Well, it's Kentucky. It's not really saying all that much.
I feel like all of Kentucky is like Mayor, Arizona. I have no idea.
Look at Jacob Franklin. Jacob Franklin taking a lot of pot shots from behind the screen.
I think Lexington's a pretty big city.
Yeah, I'm going to laugh when it's like, come on, Jacob. How big is it, Jacob?
320,000 people.
It's smaller than Tucson.
All right, but they are also...
Tucson is technically, according to this, 546,000.
All right,
so Lexington is smaller than Tucson.
Okay. All right. That's why Jacob Franklin is smarter than me, but that was not my point. My point, though, is when you live in one of those listen, Arizona fans love Arizona basketball. We all know that. But when you're in Kentucky, it is that's a different level of rabidness.
Psychotic is what it is.
It is. It's also the South. And they have just a weird, listen, man, the South is just weird. It's just weird.
Right. For sure. But that's all I'm saying, though, is that he likes Tucson because Tucson is the biggest small city. How about that? Everybody in Tucson knows each other. And when you're including the metro area, it's over 1 million people.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's 1.3 million if you include the whole metro. Yeah, look it up. Look it up, Jacob Franklin. You have access to the fiber internet right there. You just showed us that you did. So
Tucson is a city with a small town vibe.
That is a very, very good way of putting it.
I'm not saying big city. I'm just saying city.
Yes, exactly.
In 2022, the metro area population of Tucson was just over 1,003,000.
Yep. It's like I knew. It's like I knew that one.
It's almost like you eat, sleep, and breathe Tucson stuff, though.
Oh no, Tucson is a very underrated city. All right, now moving on to expectations. I wanted to ask you a couple things about a couple of players here that needed to talk about because they're going to be playing big minutes. I think we get real caught up with the Caleb Loves, the KJ Lewises, guys like that, and deservedly so because they're the top three perimeter. Mount Crevis going into the Big 12. This is, you look at Houston, you look at Baylor, you look at Kansas. Kansas returns everybody. They're going to be ridiculous. What does Saul Bookman need from Mount Crevis? What are you looking for?
I need better low post awareness because I think around the rim, he hesitates a little too much because he doesn't have a good feel for it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is I would love to see a little mid-range jumper. I would love to see like a little elbow jumper. You know what I mean? Like, he come off a pick and roll and he doesn't necessarily have to roll. He could just, flare out a little bit, and he's getting a little mid-range jumper because I don't think the three ball's in his repertoire quite as yet. So that's what I would like to see. And then defensively, you just got to be strong. Right. You got to be strong at the point of attack. Like, you can't let these guys take advantage of you. And I think he'll do both of those things.
And he's got to get stronger. The one thing that annoyed me very much about him, and I like him a great deal, is bringing the ball down. Stop bringing the ball down. Stop doing that. Every time you bring the ball down, it gets taken away from you.
Yeah, I would do bat practice.
Yes, exactly. No, and you do that, you come out of the game.
Every single time he drops that ball down low, you just whack him in the arms.
And
every single time.
And you got a guy in Tobe Awaka who bringing in, by the way, from Tennessee, that you have some insurance policy if that ball is brought to the ground as well. I'm curious to see if there's going to be a little bit more of a physicality type emphasis by Tommy Lloyd bringing in, because again, Big 12, man, that's just a different layer. The average age of the Houston roster, 22 years, 3 months.
For our roster?
No, the Houston roster.
Oh, Houston. Oh, yeah. They're old ass dudes.
They're grown men.
I mean, these are guys that put Jacob Franklin to shame.
Yeah.
Even. These guys are so big.
They're older.
So again, you're going to have to really go through something, and I think it'll be interesting to see. But what I like about Lloyd as well, and Muehlbach always makes this point. Lloyd is a very self-reflective guy at the end of seasons. It was not easy for him. He likes Kirk Kriisa. It was probably not easy for him to be able to make that move away from Kirk Kriisa, but he did make the move away from Kirk Kriisa. It was also not easy for him to probably, I think he liked Kylan Boswell, but he also has made some executive decisions that I think had to be made. And that also kind of goes against the way where people are like, oh, he's just this really nice, aw shucks guy. No, there's a competitor in there. Sorry, there is.
It is very hard to have to let people go that you really do have a vested interest in. It's tough, but what's best for the program? At the end of the day, as selfish as it may sound, like you're also fighting for your own survival,
right?
And you got to make decisions that go along with keeping your own job,
right,
alive. So sometimes you have to let go of the Boswells of the world, Kriisas, and I think they're going to be better off for it this year.
Sometime a split is best for both parties. That's not necessarily even a bad thing. One thing though that you never want to split from is the Desert Financial Credit.
Yeah, because you don't want to split that $200.
You do not want to split that $200. Now, listen, I know many people far and wide that are using the Desert Financial Credit Union
because they've been around for 84 years.
As do you, because what they always say is when you get older, you get wiser. Look at Saul Bookman right here. Saul, are you smarter now than
called you old?
Yeah.
No.
You really old.
That is not what I said. That's
what it felt like.
That is not true. I said when you get older, you get wiser.
Sure.
That is what I said. This is true.
Yeah.
I am old. Well, I don't know that I'm any wiser. I'm not going to use me as an example. But 20 years ago, people are generally a little bit smarter. Or not 20 years ago, 20 years now. Desert Financial Credit Union, though, wants to be there for you, though. They want to help you out as well. Very, very good stuff with the good folks at Desert Financial Credit Union. When you open a free checking account online, you can get $200 in bonuses. Get started by visiting Desert Financial.
They have a pretty cool Arizona
200.
They have a pretty cool Arizona Cardinals card too.
Yes, exactly. Now, also, they do have a one. Jacob Franklin, I would assume, uses Desert Financial Credit Union. This is true. Jacob Franklin.
Rates are top notch.
Right.
You can't beat Desert Financial Credit Union.
Yes, exactly. So that's where we need to go. Yes, I very much enjoy the Rita hat. The hat is missing. It has gone missing. Like I said, if I cannot find the hat, then we will not. First world dilemmas. But also, now let's say that you're looking at Arizona next year, Saul, and you're like, I think Vegas is behind Arizona football when it comes to the over-under 7.5 wins. You know where I might go and say, get a little bit of money. I might say go to the BetMGM Sportsbook app.
I think you should.
What say you? Jacob Franklin is going to get in on this one as well, the BetMGM Sportsbook app. Check this out. Here's the deal. Sign up for BetMGM and use code PHNX. Place your first BetMGM Sportsbook wager through the BetMGM Sportsbook mobile app for at least $10. You'll receive up to $1,500 bonus if the bet loses. Check out the show notes for details. Let's hear TMac denier Shane Diefenbach with a disclaimer.
First bets expire in 7 days. One new customer offer only. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY 467-369 New York. Call 1-800-327-5050 Massachusetts. 21 plus only. Please gamble responsibly. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP Arizona. 1-800-BETS-OFF Iowa. 1-800-981-0023 Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Bonus bets are non-withdrawable. In partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. See BetMGM.com for terms. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, North Carolina, Ontario, or Puerto Rico.
All right, I'm telling you guys that the smarter people have been behind the scene on Arizona when it's come to wins. First year or 2 years ago, 2.5 wins. Arizona got 5 last year. 5. They got 10. I am telling you to take the over 7.5. Get to the BetMGM Sportsbook app. Follow the boss, Saul Bookman. He is already in there. You might even see him in there, although it's virtual, so you probably won't actually see him physically in there. So that's pretty much where we're at this point. Now let me ask you this. I I was I was doing an interview with a Utah radio station the other day, and they were asking me. He said, what is Arizona's expectations in the Big 12? This is where we're so much different. He says, honestly, man, I think we're going to get obliterated. And this is a guy from Utah, and he was not talking about Arizona. He's talking about Utah. Look at just the difference in the other three schools that are entering in the Big 12 and where Arizona is in the grand scheme of things. That's kind of where the guy told me, and I think sometimes we take this for granted to a certain degree, where the guy said, you guys are just lucky because you have good players and you're stable. In this day and age, I think sometimes we take this stuff for granted. Do not take it for granted.
I'm kind of shocked to hear that. Kyle Willingham is a good coach.
No, he's talking basketball.
Basketball.
Sorry,
I'm sorry. I thought we were
apologize.
talking about football.
No, we'll get to football in a second. I apologize.
Oh yeah, basketball. Yeah, I could see him. I can see them getting obliterated. Yeah.
But then he got to the other point too, and he said, it really is unique to have two really good programs going. And he said, look at us. He said, with football, we feel like we're going to be able to acquit ourselves pretty well. With basketball, we have no clue what. Arizona goes into both of these with championship expectations for both teams. So
yeah, it's very true.
But again, I like Kyle Whittingham a great deal, by the way, as well. I think he's a very, very good coach.
It's just going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out. Yeah, it's not about the competition necessarily. It's also about the environments these new environments that we're going into. It's going to feel like every single night we show up, it's going to be a sellout crowd. Every single one every single one on the road. Like, again, the days of Arizona showing up to Gill Coliseum or the Palouse or hell, even UCLA or USC, like they weren't even selling out when Arizona was showing up. That shit is over.
Right.
Like you go to K-State, Kansas, Baylor, Houston, they're all selling out when Arizona comes to town.
Right.
Just like they sell out every single time when Kansas comes to town. Like, so this is a different environment. Like every environment will be hostile. Every single one. And so to see how these guys, adjust as they move forward is going to be the biggest thing for me. And you can't really predict that.
Do you need to have lottery picks on your team to be able to win an NBA or an NCAA championship?
No.
I totally agree with you. I get people all the time. They're like, well, you know what? Who's the lottery pick? Who's the surefire? I believe that college sports is entirely different now with the transfer portal. I'll give you an example. And again, I know Caleb Love didn't play well, but if I can have two or three all-conference players who are all-American types or, somewhere in there, but they're grown men, that to me means a lot more than the kid who is going to be a lottery pick. Perfect example here. I think Carter Bryant's going to be an absolute stud. But guess what? I'm taking Caleb Love is going to be a more impactful college basketball player next year than Carter Bryant is. I don't like the argument at all where people say that you have to have lottery picks on the team. Let's use UConn, for example. Stephon Castle's awesome. He's going to be a top 5 pick. But watching that team, you also felt that, man, they might have been able to win a championship without him as well. He's probably their third or fourth best player. So I don't buy that argument. It bothers me a great deal. And especially when people look at rosters and they're like, well, who's the lottery pick? Well, I mean, look at Kentucky the last 3 years. You got 8 lottery picks and you're getting bounced in the first round by Oakland.
Yeah, I don't agree with that at all because if you look at North Carolina when they came in 2017 and you look at their roster,
right?
Their roster wasn't like you're going through it. Okay. You tell me which one of these guys was the lottery pick. Justin Jackson, Luke May, Stillman White, Aaron Rollman, Kenny Williams, Seventh Woods, Brandon Robinson, Candler Coker, Shea Rush, Tony Bradley, Isaiah Hicks, Kennedy Meeks, Joel Berry, Theo Pinson, Nate Britt.
You know what it is? Those were a lot of really good college players.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're doing. We're competing for college.
Even if any of those guys, this is 2017, 7 years later.
Right.
Even if any of those guys was a lottery pick, were they really a lottery pick?
Really a lottery
pick? Do you even know who they are anymore? Yes. No. Most of those guys aren't even in the league.
Exactly. Hold on. I don't, off the top of my head, I wonder if any of those guys are
maybe Justin Jackson.
Can you read me that list again, Saul? We're going to see if my savant ways can,
Justin Jackson, Luke May, Kenny Williams, Seventh Woods, Tony Bradley, Isaiah Hicks, Kennedy Meeks, Joel Berry, Theo Pinson, and Nate Britt.
The only one that might be in the league is Justin Jackson. Yeah. And like you said, is that really a lottery? I mean, is that really a lottery pick? So I don't buy that argument at all.
He's in the G League.
Right. Okay. There you go. There's the point. So I don't buy that argument at all. And I think that also goes to show why Tommy Lloyd is recruiting in the manner in which he does. I also like the portal a great deal. Now they have I do think there should be some limits. The NCAA has now said that there will be no limits on that. I do not like that. I believe that you should get one free transfer, then you have to sit out If you're a grad transfer, I think you should be able to go anywhere you want. I think being able to go to 4 schools in 4 years is kind of silly. I'm all for player movement, but not that kind of player movement.
Same, likewise. It's just too much.
Right.
I mean, you're asking these coaches to juggle a lot,
right?
To try and figure out everything. You're recruiting 2 different cycles of people. And it's just too much.
So you agree? You get one free transfer because again, sometimes stuff doesn't work out. After that, unless there's a really extenuating circumstance, I think you should have to sit out a year.
Agreed.
That's kind of where I'm at this point.
Agreed.
All right, now Arizona football. We're moving over to Arizona football, and then we're going to have a fun little list right here. Arizona football gets defensive tackle commit out of USC. This is where, and I'm just going to use this argument, and I keep hearing this argument all the time. Well, I didn't really play a lot at USC. I do not care. When I get players from USC, like look at Taylor Upshaw last year. Taylor Upshaw at Arizona, they're like, well, you didn't play much at Michigan. That's a different animal. That is a different talent level. And again, so if I bring in a guy from USC, I bring in a player from anywhere. I'm just speaking in generalities at this point. That to me is a little bit different. Arizona's not necessary. You can find guys that get lost in the shuffle with 5-star players. You can't necessarily, and if you're at Arizona, you're going to get that opportunity. Sometimes guys just don't get that opportunity at other places because they're buried on a team of other NFL players.
Yeah, and this isn't necessarily like you're looking for a superstar. You need depth.
Yep.
You need depth on that defensive line so bad.
Right.
So if you can get some guy off the roster of USC to come over and do it, like, yeah, absolutely do it all day long. So that's what I think this is. This is just really a depth play. You hope that he develops into a really, really good player, of course, but depth, you need depth. That defensive line needs all the depth in the world.
Right. And that's what made Arizona so good last year. Think about it. You had your starting rotation. You had Taylor Upshaw, and then you had Isaiah Ward as your ends. But then you were also able to bring in a Deuce Davis. As your tackles, you had BBN, Big Bill Norton. You had Tai Tagovailoa. You had drawing a blank now on it, but you had Tyler Manoa, Tia Savea, Jacob Kangaika, et cetera, et cetera. You were able to come with 7-8 guys, and that made a difference. I mean, look at Oklahoma when they played Oklahoma. Arizona was still forcing turnovers in the 4th quarter. Saul, you and I have seen a lot of bad Arizona football. We have seen guys that look like me. Well, not like me, but we have seen guys that do not look like they should be on the defensive line, and they're having to play 80% of the game. Being able to keep them fresh is a big thing. So if I can get guys in here that even if they're going to play 10, 15 snaps, but they could be productive snaps, I say yes, sign me up for 2.
Yeah, absolutely. All day long.
I mean, I do not really understand the drawback at all on this. You know what else I don't understand the drawback of? Because there is none.
There's none.
OGs.
Yeah, there's no drawback.
Saul Bookman is the best reader. I've watched all the reads. Saul Bookman is the best reader of OGs that I believe that this world has ever created.
I don't think so.
Oh, you named me a better one.
I don't know.
Stop, Mr. Humbleness.
I will say this: the Clementine gummy. They have the mega gummy. I tried it for the first time yesterday. 100 milligrams, and it's probably about the size of like a dollar.
Okay.
Like the coin dollar, right?
Okay.
And
it's like a small cookie.
And the slices are like super tiny. So you wouldn't think it was 10 milligrams, but yeah, it's 10 milligrams. You can easily take that whole thing and completely ruin your whole day. So don't do that.
Right.
Make sure if you go to ogsbrands.com and you get that big Clementine gummy, it's like a big circle, and you enjoy it responsibly. It's 10 milligrams a piece. It's easy. Go to ogsbrands.com, find the closest dispensary to you. Go get you one. It's fantastic. They also got the other RSOs. They got the sativas, the indicas, all that good stuff. So check it out.
Oh, look who we have in here. The great Shane Diefenbach with the disclaimer. Interesting. Hello, Shane Diefenbach. But enjoy responsibly, as the boss Saul Bookman said.
21 and over.
Yep, 21 and over. Again, Saul has to watch all these people here at PHNX, so you need to listen to what Saul has to say. All right, Saul. Now, I wanted to get to a little bit of this was an interesting talk that we had. Now, did you ever see Sean Elliott in person? Were you old enough to understand? Let me ask you that.
No.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I am old enough to understand, but I never got to see him in person.
Okay. We are going to go with our list of the 5 best basketball players we have ever seen.
I thought we were talking football. The receivers.
We are going to the receivers. Okay. I wanted to give you a little bit of a tease first.
Okay, gotcha.
But that is something we were going to end with, though.
All right.
But I do not understand something. Tetairoa McMillan, Luther Burden.
Yeah.
Why in the world does everybody consider Luther Burden to be the best wide receiver in college football when TMac is bigger, has better numbers, is more imposing? I do not understand this.
Listen, objectively speaking, the reason why he's getting more love is because he played in the SEC and played against higher competition than TMac. That's the only reason. That changes this year because the competition level obviously increases when you go to the Big 12, and you're going to see TMac thrive. Listen, Burton is a good player.
He's awesome.
He's a really good player.
Awesome.
And a lot of the sites out there that project the top 2 receivers or the top 3 or 4 receivers in the country have those 2 listed as 1 and 2. And most of them have Burton slotted at 1 and TMac at 2. But that will change because there's going to be, listen, man, a lot of people didn't get to watch TMac play last year. You know why? Because he was on the fucking Pac-12 network.
Right.
That changes this year.
Right.
That all changes. So you're going to see a lot more TMac. He's going to get a lot more love. If he balls out these first couple games, guess what? He skyrockets all the way to the top of the list in terms of the wide receivers. But Burton's a very good player.
You know who has TMac as number 1? Louis Riddick. Louis Riddick, a very, very good follow on Twitter. Louis Riddick did a game.
You know why?
Why is that?
Because you saw him in person.
He saw him in person. And he said, here's what he said about TMac. And this is what I always kind of come back to with TMac. TMac's catch radius is amazing. I know that's a term that everybody loves using now. I actually like that term, so I'm going to keep using it. But his catch radius is fantastic. When you look at what NFL number 1 wide receivers, what they're supposed to look like, as far as the proverbial jump ball, go up and get it, that is TMac to a T. That is TMac to a T. Get it, the TMac.
Yeah.
But he is a like I said, I don't quite get why he's viewed as number 2. But you're right. It's probably because of the SEC. All of that. I think people will see this year. I also believe that. Let me ask you this, Saul. Let me ask you this: is there a chance that TMac, outside of, I'm not going to put him in Gronk's class because Gronk, I think you could make the case is the best tight end of all time. Would you be surprised if TMac was the second best U of A NFL player?
No, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I would not be surprised by that at all. I think TMac has a ton of potential. And I think he could easily be. Listen, Gronk wasn't selected on day 1. Right. He was a 2nd round pick for the Patriots. And even they didn't really understand what they really had in Gronk until they got to get their hands on him. I think TMac's going to be largely the same. I think if TMac shows that he can build on his explosiveness, maybe a little bit of breakaway speed.
What does he need to run in the 40, in your opinion?
I think.
Is a 4.48 good enough?
I think a 4.48 is plenty good.
Yeah, I agree.
For the draft, for sure. If he wants to really separate himself, he could be in that low 4.3 range, and then he would easily separate himself.
Because what's going to be interesting is to see what he measures in and weighs in at, because he's going to measure in at 6'5". He's not 6'2.5". He's not any of this stuff. He's not one of those fake heights. He's legitimately 6'5.5". He's probably not quite as tall as Jacob Franklin, but he is also very tall.
I really would like to see him develop physically a little bit more. And I think that's, obviously I think that's what the work he's putting in right now. I think his route running is clean. It can get a little crisper. In terms of using your body for separation at the point of the catch, at the high point. But he's got all the natural instincts and skills you could ever want from an individual. And that's what separates TMac from just about every wide receiver in the country, is because everything is natural for him. So you're just building on top of that natural athleticism and that natural instinct. And I don't think that's the thing that if you don't watch TMac on a day-to-day basis, you probably don't understand. You see the highlights and that's all well and good, but you don't really appreciate how easy this game is for him and how much he can be a dominant entity out there. And so that's
and he's barring injury, he's guaranteed to put up numbers, because again, when you've got that kind of synergy that you've got with a Noah Fafita, I mean, he's going to put up numbers. He's going to be that dude. So when you look at next week, we're going to start talking about this a little bit, but they're coming out with the best lists of the best players in each conference. And I believe it was Lindy's that came out, and they have TMac as the best player in the entire Big 12.
Nice. I love it.
Absolutely. Now,
you know who writes for Lindy's?
Oh, some guy named Tony Gimino.
Yeah, some guy.
What's that guy know? This guy, these fly-by-night people, stepping in out of nowhere and then just leaving. What do they know, these guys? All right. Now, also, we're going to get in a fun little list here. But first, No better time to become a PHNX diehard, my friends. All kinds of really, really good stuff going on in the Discord chat. It is taken off. These things are going like hotcakes. So you need to hop in there and become a PHNX diehard. Saul, what do you got going on, my
We
friend?
have multiple things going on. Number one, we have a Mercury takeover that starts next week, next Friday, I believe, on the 13th. It's going to be fantastic. Home against the Aces. We get to play the Aces at home. It's going to be a fun time. Come check it out. If you've never seen a WNBA game, now's your time. Buy tickets. Come hang out with us. It's going to be a great time. Number two, we have a trip to Miami that you should be purchasing right now because it's going to be fun. You get to hang out with the Cards crew. We're going to go down to Miami, watch the Dolphins and the Cards play, have a great time. We have a booze cruise all lined up. We have everything set for you, food, beer, the whole 9 yards. So it's gonna be a great time, plus the tailgate. And then finally, and this is a challenge to everybody, our first ever, and we don't have a graphic for this yet, but our first ever trivia night, PHNX trivia night. Ooh. Out there, chicken and pickle, on the 20th in 2 weeks. It's gonna be a fantastic time.
To use one of my favorite terms, people, you deserve that. So hop in there. You 1000% deserve that. So again, become a PHNX diehard today. You are going to Miami, correct?
Yes, diehard save 20% on a lot of our events. So come check it out.
Check it out. All right, now. Wanted to do something coming up with doing some lists a little bit in the off season. I wanted to ask Saul Bookman the 5 best basketball players that he considers in Arizona history. Now, again, I did not put Sean Elliott on my list because even though I am very old, I was still only 3.
I'm going to change it up a little bit.
What do you got?
I'm not going to pick the 5 best players who I think are the 5 best players. I'm going to pick my 5 players that I like to watch the most.
Okay, cool. I'm in on that. Let's do it.
Cool. Number 5 for me, Michael Wright.
Okay.
I loved watching Michael Wright play because I just felt like he was such an unorthodox lefty. Rest in peace.
Did you know what his nickname was in high school?
No.
Given to him by Kevin Garnett.
Who?
Because, he and KG played along with Ronnie Fields.
Yeah.
Kevin Garnett called him Big Black. And so he was playing against the Phoenix Suns. I believe this was in 99. And they asked Michael, I think it was Bruce Pascoe that actually asked him. And he says, Big Black. He says, I forgot about him. How's he doing? And he says, well, he was just the Pac-10 freshman of the year.
Yeah.
And then you see KG light up and he's like, I'm going to have to get in touch with him.
Yeah.
Cool little story, though.
That is cool. Yeah, man, Michael Wright was fantastic. I loved watching him play. I just loved his style. That's basically, and he just seemed like such a nice kid, man.
He really was. And he was the guy, too, that you talk about coming in ready to play immediately. That was that dude. I remember his first game against, I think it was the University of Tennessee. And I'm also back in the days, this was also back in the days, young buck Mike Luke, where I couldn't understand why Lute Olson sometimes didn't play the best players to start out the season. And Eugene Edgerson was starting. And I said, why is Michael Wright not playing? And then sometimes you get coaches that are like, well, you got to earn it first. Within 5 games, Michael Wright was obviously starting. I like Michael Wright there. I'm going to put Michael Wright at number 5 as well.
There you go.
Big fan of Michael Wright. And what I liked about Michael Wright is every time he got the ball in the low post, he had a little shoulder dip or whatever. He either got fouled or he finished every single time. The dude was absolutely remarkable. Big fan of Michael Wright. I like that one. I'm going Michael Wright at 5 as well.
All right. Number 4 for me. This is probably the most controversial one I have.
How's it controversial? It's who you like.
Because I don't think a lot of people will appreciate it, but I'm going to go with Mark Lyons. Mark Lyons at number 4. The only reason why is because I really felt like Mark Lyons first did not give a you-know-what, and he had a little bit of an attitude, a little bit of an ego, which I thought we really needed. And that bucket against Florida, I don't think people realize how huge that bucket really ended up being because it basically put Arizona right back into the national, in the front, like because for a while there, we weren't really relevant.
That was a loaded Florida team, Kenny Boynton, all those guys, for sure. Yep.
Yeah, it's such a big bucket. Mark Lyons talks so much trash, man. I liked that about my players.
Also think Mark Lyons is one of the more underrated players, to be honest with you, because a lot of people like to poo on Mark Lyons, and I do not understand that one at all. Because here's the thing: was he perfect? No. Again, but I'll say this: out of all the Sean Miller era players, he is the one player on the perimeter that if I need a bucket in the last 15 seconds of a game, I am taking Mark Lyons, and I am taking him every single day of the week. I think Mark Lyons is a very underrated player. I do not. I do not, and honestly, I don't even understand the argument against Mark Lyons, to be honest with you.
Some people have their own thing.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, but I do not agree with it. All right, now my number 4, I am going Khalid Reeves. Khalid Reeves to me was, that was the best backcourt in college basketball. Khalid Reeves made things look really, really easy. He was Lute's first national big-time mega recruit out of Christ the King High School in New York, by the way. And he is sometimes, people always talk about Jason Terry and about how he took a back seat. And it's true. I mean, listen, dude's a 6-man national player of the year. Khalid Reeves averaged 12 points per game his sophomore and junior year because he's taken a back seat to Chris Mills and Brian Williams before that. And then he averages 24.5 points per game and has the best scoring season in U of A history. Guess what? He could have averaged more than 13 points per game before his senior year. I loved watching Khalid Reeves. I loved how smooth he was. The reason he didn't really work out in the NBA is he was kind of a player without a position at that point when they wanted to be able to put you right into that position. And basketball just came easy to him. Khalid Reeves was the man. I like Khalid Reeves.
Number 3 for me is going to be, however you feel about DeAndre Ayton, I think most of us at the U of A appreciated DeAndre when he was there at school. I thought that DA did things as a big man that we have never seen another U of A big do. And I think physically and athletically, he was as gifted as anybody in the country. I got to watch him for just about every single game outside of the games in the Bahamas and the Atlantis. In the Atlantis tournament. And I just thought that DA was fantastic. And sitting there courtside to watch the Pac-12 tournament, to me, was like his dominance and physically just absolutely owning everything in the paint against Shemezi Metu, just made him look like he was in middle school. And then let's not forget about the drop down pass to Raleigh Alkins for probably one of the most incredible dunks in U of A history. So for those reasons, DA is my number 3 player.
And he is a guy that had to put up with a lot of stuff because all the stuff, listen, the book stuff all happened, obviously, but the DeAndre Ayton stuff, I mean, the FBI couldn't find anything there, and he had to deal with a lot of those rumors and stuff. So I have no problem with that. I think I was listening to the GOAT Brian Jeffries one time on the radio, and he said that when DeAndre, because he doesn't follow recruiting. I mean, he's Brian Jeffries, got a lot bigger things to do than nerd out on that stuff. But he said, I had just heard the name DeAndre Ayton, and he said, but I didn't, wasn't watching videos of him or anything. He says, I knew exactly who he was the first time that he just walked out onto the court. I didn't have to ask. I didn't have to, because with a lot of players, you got to ask. He says, I knew exactly who he was. And that was that. So that's a good one. All right. Now, number three for me, I am going Jason Terry. Jason Terry's probably my all-time favorite Wildcat. I love Jason Terry. I believe that Jason Terry and Gilbert Arenas are the 2 best pros that I've in U of A history. But JT was just the man. JT was the one that kept everything light for that team, because you got to remember, the team that won the championship, this was not a loosey-goosey group of guys. Miles Simon was very much of that Michael Jordan alpha, kind of a jerk, for lack of a better term. Mike Bibby never said anything. Michael Dickerson didn't say anything. AJ Bramlett, Bennett Davison still trying to find their way. JT was the one that just kind of brought all of that together. He was, what you saw with JT publicly was exactly what he was off. And again, dude was a national player of the year after all those guys left. Scored almost 20,000 career NBA points, gave LeBron James the business in the NBA finals in games 4, 5, and 6. JT to me is, I'm just glad his jersey's retired. I'll leave it at that. Saul.
JT, well-deserved. One of my funnest guys I've watched too. I'm going to go with a tandem.
Okay.
Because I feel like you can't talk about one without the other, even though a lot of people do. But the times when Iggy and Hot Sauce were on the court together, I feel like we saw more alley-oops in that season than at any other point in time in college basketball history. It was just so much fun to watch them get out and run and really be able to perform at a high level. Who's the point guard on that team? Mustafa Shakur. Yeah. Shakur was, throwing lobs left and right. That was fun. That was fun to watch those two guys play together because they were uniquely talented and skilled in different ways, but they
Right.
both were athletic enough to go get the ball at like the highest point.
I thought that Lute Olson the year before, because that the year that Shakur was a freshman, they were an 8 seed and they got bounced. But the year before, when they were a 1 seed, I thought Lute Olson did disservice by not playing Iggy and Hassan more. I like Rick Anderson, good dude, all of that, good player. But the one thing that team lacked in that starting lineup with Fry, Anderson, Gardner,
Athleticism.
Walton was athleticism, man.
Yeah.
And one of those two dudes brought an athleticism quotient that nobody else on that roster had.
Yeah.
Both those guys were fantastic.
My wife tutored Iggy.
Did she really?
When she was down at the school. At school.
Did she really?
She did.
Interesting. A very smart man, Andre Iguodala. Very smart man.
At that time, maybe not so much.
Lute Olson, again, and Lute was honest about this later on. Lute told Iggy shoo after his sophomore year. He was it just didn't fit.
Yeah.
And Iggy, I think, learned a lot as he got older, but Iggy was 1 foot out the door, and Arizona, with basically the same roster minus Iggy, got a lot better that following year because they went from getting knocked out in the first round to losing in that game against Illinois in the Elite Eight. So Iggy was kind of told to move on. But, sometimes when you're 20 years old or whatever, you don't always make the smartest decisions.
For sure.
All right. Who's your number 2?
That was my number 2.
Oh, your number 2. All right. My number
two.
2. I am going to go with your guy, Salim Stoudemire.
Okay.
All right. Salim was... I don't know even what to say, man. If you lived Salim, you knew it. Salim just had so many, quote Saul Bookman, just so many iconic moments, whether that was, that second half against Kansas as a sophomore when he dropped 897 points, or, the big shots against Aaron Aflalo where Arizona just needed one point to tie in 2 points. And he says, nah, we're going to win by 2 points. I'm going to pull up from 85 feet, nothing but net. Game winner against ASU up here that I was at. An underrated athlete as well. He could really fly. Salim was just the man. And one of my biggest things that I love that Lute Olson did is when Dick Vitale kept ignoring Salim Stoudemire that year and just talking about JJ Redick, he said, listen, this dude's shooting 10 percentage points higher and he's taking more threes. Come on. Salim was the man. Don't know what else to say.
Salim's my number 1. So one of the funnest guys I've ever watched play in a U of A uniform. Loved every minute of it. I know there was some toxic stuff, but when you're kind of ignorant to that stuff from the outside looking in, you don't really care. I want wins and I want exciting games, and Salim gave me plenty of both.
I got Damon at 1. Going both the Stoudemires. Damon, to me, like I said, I think it's a crime that Damon's jersey is not retired. I believe that it's absolutely insane that it's not, because he was the second first-team All-American to ever come through here outside of Sean Elliott. So you got to remember that. And again, I know I made this point before, but if I make a good point, I'm just going to keep beating it home because I don't make many good points. Damon Stoudemire made point guard you sexy, period. That's who the kids wanted to be. With the Saul Bookmans, playing on the playground, were not growing up wanting to be Steve Kerr, and that's with all due respect to Steve Kerr. They wanted to be Damon Stoudemire, the dude with the Clockers or the dude that Mekhi Phifer's wearing the Clockers jersey. And there was just something about Damon. Damon was just cut from a different cloth. He was before his time. First guy that was, heavily tatted in college, just playing the way that he was, kind of that street ball type stuff. Damon was the man, and I believe that it's long past due that Damon Stoudemire's jersey should be retired. Saul and I generally agree on Jason Gardner. I applaud what Jason Gardner did, but there's no comparison between the basketball players or the impact that Damon Stoudemire and Jason Gardner had here. If Gardner's jersey is up there, Damon Stoudemire's jersey deserves to be up there. 100%. And here's another thing too. Ed O'Bannon was named the National Player of the Year that year. Guess who shared Conference Player of the Year honors with Damon Stoudemire? Ed O'Bannon. So I can make the case that Damon Stoudemire should have also been the National Player of the Year.
There you go.
There we go. But very much appreciate you all. I like coming up here. Exactly. I got to bother Jacob Franklin for an hour. I think that I surprised him a little bit with some of my intelligence. It's true, Jacob Franklin.
We'll go with that.
All right, we'll go with that. But the boss, Saul Bookman, again, remind people what you've got going on, because you've got a smorgasbord of good stuff.
Yeah, take over. Go to our events page. Go phnx.com/events. Check out all the events that we have going on for the rest of the month. They're fantastic. The Mercury Takeover, the trip to Miami in October, or trivia on the 20th on the west side. So either one, come out, have fun.
For the great Jacob Franklin, for the venerable Saul Bookman, I am merely Mike Luke. You have been listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast.
We all silly like the mayor.